Eyes wide open. Step into the shadows. If you think the stories are just myths, think again. Now let's take a look.
Lights on in this room. Anybody need help in here? Whoa. Just got a serious chill. You might be.
I work in hospice. Spirits are real. I'm sorry. Ghosts are real. I'm gonna be the first one to tell you. One time I'm in this room on my own and I'm cleaning this body to be bagged. I'm the only one in there, right? I'm by the body. The bathroom call light starts going off, like ringing. And I'm like, so I walk in there, press the little button, turn it off. Walk back out there, starts going off again. I walk back in there, turn it off. I walk back out to the body and the call light that's like next to her is buzzing, like it's making a buzzing noise. They don't do that. They don't make that noise. I was like, the time this girl that I work with is holding this patient's hand as they passed. And then when they like close their eyes, passed, took their last breath, she looks up at the light starts flickering. Like immediately after the patient passed, light starts flickering. They don't do that. I had this confused patient once, and he did not remember what he said 3 seconds ago. Like was not talking about the same stuff all day. He was super confused, right? 3 separate times throughout the day, he looks at me and asks me about the lady with long black hair standing behind me and not smiling. What the do you mean? The lady with long black hair standing behind me and not smiling? Spirits are real. I'm sorry.
At this time, I worked on a COVID unit. We had 12 rooms that were functional. And what we did was these people were very sick. But we were also at this time, we had COVID patients with COVID precautions, but we were also transitioning to where our COVID patients were out of precautions and we're starting to have visitors again. So there were 4 nurses. It was me, Janet, Ashley, and Regina. And at this time, we had to have our patients sign waivers that they were okay or not okay to have video cameras in their room. So we had a monitor up at the nurse's station so we could keep eyes on them all the time. We have one room that is directly behind and to the left of the nurse's station that is a negative pressure room. So if you don't know what a negative pressure room is, it's normally used for airborne illnesses that require you to have a N95, which we use for COVID anyways, but it also had 2 doors to get into it. This is key. So anyways, we had done like our cluster care that morning. We did total care, and at this time finding a tech or an aide to work was 0 to none. We are sitting at the nurse's station and we are catching up on our charts. And where the nurse's station is, there is an elevator on this side and an elevator on this side. So we see who comes and goes all day long. Anyways, we had a patient in the negative pressure room and we had started noticing things early on in the shift on the camera, just things that weren't really adding up. So I had asked his nurse, hey, is somebody else in the room with him? And she was like, no, he's under strict COVID precautions. Nobody should be in the room with him. And we're like, yeah, we haven't seen anybody going in and out. And those doors are very loud and we hadn't heard one open or close. So we're watching the monitors and we watch this orb come into the video camera and then fly back behind this man's bed. We're all looking at each other like there's no way, we're just seeing things until this man starts to yell, there is someone in my room and he is behind my bed. So Regina, who was the nurse at the time, actually runs into the room and she's trying to let him know, like, hey, nobody's in here. But while she is speaking to him, there is a dark shadow on the opposite side of the bed as her, and we are all losing our minds out at the nurse station. So throughout the shift, the same man keeps screaming. I mean, hollering at the top of his lungs. There's somebody in my room. There's somebody in my room. We're trying to reassure him, like, nobody else is in your room. And I think Janet went in there and had actually moved the bedside table like 6 foot away from this man's bed. And this man could not walk. He could not get up. He could not even sit up in the bed. We are charting again. And we look up and we see his bedside table fly into the wall. I'm talking about, it looked like somebody had launched this thing 10 feet into the wall in front of the bed. At this point, we're so freaked out that when it is time to do rounds and all that stuff, we actually went as a group into this man's room. At some point during the day, the guy that had came and got the shreds actually had walked up there and he was like, you guys look like you've seen a ghost. And we were like, you know, filling him in on what was going on. He's like, y'all are crazy. You know, this is not true. Until the bedside table flies into the wall one more time while he's watching, and he left and we never seen him again. It had kind of calmed down throughout the day, but we would also notice that, so you could see his bed right here, and to the right of the bed was the bathroom, and you would see the bathroom door open up, shut, open up. And it just got to the point where we're like, if we ignore it, it'll go away. So, case management had came up to the floor that day, and we're talking to her. She's asking questions about this man. And we're like, by the way, you know, don't think we're crazy, but this, and this has happened today. She looks us dead in the face, white as a ghost, and says, you're kidding. And we're like, yeah, we're not going to make something like that up. She proceeds to tell us that she actually had just got off the phone with this man's brother, who stated he has been fighting demons his whole life. Demons. So this hospital, you couldn't just open a window freely, because I wish I could make this up, but people literally would hang out of the building to smoke cigarettes. So maintenance had screwed all of the windows shut. When this man got discharged a few days later, we went and unscrewed one of the screws and just kind of prayed and tried to get all the bad juju out. It takes a lot to scare me, but the hairs on my arms and everything literally stood up straight. It was the creepiest thing I have ever encountered in my whole life. And to see it on video in live time was insane. After he left that room, it seems like every time I've worked there after that, something odd had always happened.
As a woman of faith and a nurse who works in the hospital, I 100% believe that if you believe in God, you have to believe in the devil too, because even Satan believed in God, right? So let's talk about my experience. It will creep you out just as bad as it creeps me out every single time I tell the story. I had this patient a couple years ago, male, mid-50s, good family, like stable life. I get him on my assignment not knowing what I was walking into. He was on a psych hold, he had a sitter, and I was completely blindsided when I walked into the room. A couple years prior, he had attempted to commit. Now, this is where the story starts, but it's definitely not where it ends. A couple years prior to this hospital stay, his wife, everybody was getting ready for work. He was a stable, had a financial business career, I don't know what, but successful kids, married for 20 plus years, no financial concerns, nothing.
everybody's getting ready for work. I believe the kids were already out of the house. I think that's what his wife told me. They were grown and gone, and him and his wife are getting ready for work, and something changed in this man. Something happened. The wife leaves for work, and something possesses this man out of nowhere to grab a load it, and attempt to take his own life. Right underneath of his chin. He failed. It was not successful. His wife actually found him when she got home. I don't even know that is so miraculous to me that he was home all day by himself like that. And I believe something was wrong, like something didn't seem right. He didn't show up to work, so he wasn't there like all day, but they find him and complete, like, I can't even describe it. The whole side of his face is gone. Eyes are gone. This whole half of his jaw is gone. The ear gone. Like, blown off of his face. I mean, it literally, like, made a cave on that side of his face with this that he had no prior psych history. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So he's on my assignment. I have him for a couple of days. His wife is wonderful. She still loves him very much. She sits with him every day. He is so nice and so kind. He can still talk a little bit. Very hard to understand. But once you talk to him for a little while, things start to sound a little more clear not more clear, but you start to understand what he's saying, right? He's saying please and thank you. He tells me the story. He, clear as day, tells me the story that he has no idea what happened, no history. Something possessed him to grab that when his wife walked out the door and shot himself in the chin with it. Can you explain that? I can't. Well, I can't explain it. I actually can't explain it. A couple days pass. He's on my assignment. I've spent several 12-hour shifts with this man. He's so nice and so kind, and I am beginning to, like, think, well, maybe this wasn't demonic. Like, I'm not understanding what's happening. And so then he's sitting at the hospital this whole time waiting to go over to the adult psych unit. Waiting till he's medically clear, till there's a bed, what have you. So then, a bed comes available. I am getting this man ready. Security's there to take him over, because it's like across our campus. And I tell him, like, he gives me a hug, right? Gets up, gives me a hug, says, it was so nice meeting you. I appreciate all of your care. Super kind. So I give this man a hug. He willingly hugs me back. He's saying thank you. It was so nice to meet you. Thanks for taking care of me. And then I say something like, well, you're officially added to my prayer list. I'm going to be praying for you. I just pray that you get the help that you need so that this doesn't happen again. You know, we'd really like to keep you around, your wife included, but me also. I would really like to see you again, just not here. And when I said that, this person's whole demeanor, everything changed. Literally, eyes went black, turned around, looked at me like he was looking right through me, and said, don't count on it. Like, a whole different voice, whole different demeanor, everything. Like, that was not the person that I have been talking to for the last several days. Every time I tell that story, it scares the heck out of people. And I fully believe that that man was possessed. There was nothing that could explain what he did, why he did it. The demeanor change, the attitude change, the
black eyes like nothing. But again, as a woman of faith, especially working in the hospital, if you believe in God, then you've got to believe in Satan, because even Satan believed in God.
So I get a new admission. He wasn't a new admission. He was a transfer from another unit. So I get a transfer from another unit, and I'm trying to like get him comfortable on our floor in his room. And everything that I'm doing and saying is bothering this man. And I'm like, why are you so agitated? Like, what happened? You just got here. Like, what's wrong? He's like, I haven't slept in 2 days. And I'm like, in 2 days? Why? Why haven't you slept? And then he goes, I'm not going to tell you because nobody else has believed me. And I'm like, try me. So he goes on to tell me that when he was on the other unit, he said, I used my car light like normal. They answered from the nurse's station. They asked me what I needed. I told them I needed a warm blanket. Cool. Somebody gets the warm blanket, goes into his room. Apparently they opened the blanket and they covered his entire body, but including his face. They covered his face. So he got to panicking because for some reason he said that his arms were paralyzed. Like he couldn't move his arms. And so he started to panic. He's like, yo, can you take the blanket off my face? And so they weren't responding. He's like, take the blanket off my face. And so the lady responds, it's okay. Go to sleep. Just close your eyes. So he starts panicking. He's like, yo, take the blanket off my face. He starts screaming. He starts crying. He starts praying. Somebody runs into the room. They peel the blanket back off his face and they're like, are you okay? And he's like, who was that? Where did she go? And they're like, who are you talking about? He's like, the nurse that was just in here. And they're like, nobody was in here. He's like, I called the nurse's station to ask for a blanket, and this person came in and they're like, we didn't see you call the nurse's station. So he starts describing this person, and the staff is saying, we don't know anybody here by that description. They go to the nurse's station to confirm if anybody else saw this person. Everybody said no, right? I go back to my nurse's station and I start telling one of my friends, nurses, and I'm like, listen, this patient just told me that this and that happened. And I start describing the nurse the same way that he described the nurse. And she's like, stop lying. And I'm like, well, why? She's like, stop playing. And I'm like, why? She goes, no, because we had a patient in room, I'm not gonna say the room number, in that room, and this patient randomly went unconscious for 2 days. Now they did MRI, CTs, EEGs. Everything was stable. She was hemodynamically stable, but she was not conscious. So apparently this patient, when she came to, said, now hold on, for context, our floor is shaped like a square. All of the nurses' stations are in the middle and the patient's rooms like are on the border, right? So this patient says that a nurse was in the room with her and told her, hey, it's okay, close your eyes, go to sleep, right? Sounds familiar? Now the patient was like, no, I don't want to. I want to go for a walk. So the patient was walking with the nurse around the nurse's station, doing the square for 2 days. Now she didn't have any concept of time while she thought it was a dream. She had no concept of time while she was in her dream, but she woke up and said, I had the craziest dream and this was the dream. When she described the nurse, apparently it is the same nurse that my guy saw. And I was like, when the other nurse told me, I was like, you're playing with me. She's like, how would you know that nurse's description if nobody here has told you that story? And we only knew of this lady from the story that the other patient had told us. And I was like,
I've had so many spiritual encounters as a hospice nurse, but this one has always been the craziest to me. I was taking care of a woman who went from being just very sick to actively dying in a very short time frame. Her daughter was coming in town from very far away, and her dad decided to not let her know that she had gone to actively dying because she was driving and he didn't want her to be unsafe. I'm standing at my patient's bedside holding her hand and in my head praying to please let that daughter get there in time to see her mom. I hear the front door open, and then I hear the daughter yell, hey dad, just gonna go put my stuff down and go to the bathroom. And then I heard myself yell at her, no, you come here right now. I would never do that. But the daughter came over, she kissed her mom on the forehead, and her mom took her last breath right that second.
I've been kind of MIA for a couple days. I had a very jacked up experience at one of my shifts that's never seen before in my entire life. This will be the top of my experience of demonic, where if you don't think heaven and hell is real, and you don't think that demons or whatever they send to come get you and collect your soul when you die, you don't think that's real, it's real. It's taken me a couple days to pull myself together, because the after effects of it and being in this situation and being around this has affected. It'll affect you. You guys ever see the movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze? This was even worse. This fella had been, he had hospice and everything, but he had been lingering for a couple days. I know how to make the family feel at ease, but this situation, there was nothing I could do. All forth. The family was believers. The guy dying was not. And a lot of times they'll tell me the history of, they want to talk about the family member that's passed away and how good they were and what they've done and how they did with their life and how they're good, this person, their family. This family basically told me this guy was a scumbag, deadbeat dirtbag. The one family member just come out and told me, and I don't ever talk bad about people's family members or anything. That's just, you don't do that. You got to go in these situations neutral. You're just there to be support and do your nursing and do what you got to do and follow doctor's orders and the family's requests and stuff. This woman just straight out said, this guy, my dad was a narcissist. He was a hardcore narcissist. He was selfish. He abandoned us multiple times. He abandoned our mother, left us with nothing, jumped from woman to woman. They had, on several occasions, he had found good women, and he hurt them, and through them, it just treated them like garbage, and these women were, the stuff, and here, when she's telling me this story, I'm relating because I've been through this, and I'm going, oh, my goodness. And I'm thinking, why are these people here? I'm surprised they're here. Well, they were born again Christians, and they were doing what they believe, honor your mother and father. They're just being there for him. Okay. Some of the family members did not show up. Some of the siblings didn't want to be there. They didn't want to do with them, but some of the ones tried to uphold try to be there. The wives, none. One of them showed up, said, help them, good riddance. This guy did some dirty stuff to people. And at any time, I had asked, I said, at any time, did he ever try to make amends? Did he ever try to repent? Did he try to fix anything? Did he go to anybody in repent? She goes, no, he would always blame. He would always, and I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what a narcissist does, They pretend like they don't do no wrong and blame everybody. And I went, geez, man, it's terrible, but, and I told him, I said, it's really kind of you and good-hearted of you to come here, at least support him and not let him be alone when he passes away. Now, this guy he was incoherent at this point. He was going to pass away that evening. And, there's like 4 or 5 family members there. And these rooms are small. He's starting to get the agonal breaths every couple hours. I went to my cart, was passing some meds to other patients. Family member comes back out and says, could you come in here for a minute? I come in here. I go in there. This guy's acting strange. And I knew, in my beliefs of heaven and hell, I'm thinking, okay, this guy, he's on his last leg. I mean, I'm seeing, he's going to pass away any minute. He's got some the agonal breaths going on. I knew he could hear, but he wasn't opening his eyes. He wasn't doing anything. All of a sudden, this guy backs up. He stiffens. His body stiffens like you would stiffen if you're seeing something or you're scared. His eyes pop open. He's stiff as a board, kind of pushes himself up against the bed and starts screaming that he's not going. He's not going. He's not going. No. I mean, the full-on, full-blown, and you want to talk about the family freaking out. They're trying to hold him down. They can't believe that one minute he was completely ready to just go, and the next minute he's acting like he's ready to jump out of that bed and run for his life. That part, it does scare you. It freaks you out a little bit, but I knew what was going on. And I know they know what was going on. Maybe some of them knew what was going on. But what freaked me out was when I was over by the side of the bed, I had to tell, there was no IV access. This is a nursing home. He's on hospice. What he was getting was oral morphine and stuff like that. I couldn't shoot him up with something and knock him out. There's nothing I could do, It was almost like he couldn't hear what anybody else was saying when they're trying to calm him down on all he's got his eyes fixed on whatever is standing in front of him or hovering down on him. These neon lights, those long, whatever, stupid hospital lights, the long ones. And this was an old nursing home. The lights start flickering. we never had any, I've never, the whole couple few hours, hours I'd already been there. I was there from 7 p.m. to 7 a. And I'd already been there 4 or 5 hours. Those lights never did that. They started flickering, and I knew. I'm on, oh my God, this is not happening. This is not happening. I've never seen this. I've never seen it to this extent before. I've seen people get up, open their eyes, and look at something and talk to things, but I didn't see this. Never seen this before. Never seen this before. I started praying. Yes, I started praying. Now, I wasn't going to get up and do the whole in front of everybody because I didn't want to offend the family, but I started praying. I was doing some, trying to rebuke and everything. And weird as it is, it was so weird. Something said, you can't stop this. There's nothing you can do. And I'm looking around. Now, this room is small. The room is small. There's about, let me see, there's 5 people besides myself in that room. So it was pretty packed. And plus they had like some carts in there with food and snacks on it because they, for people, their family was waiting. And then there's a curtain. The sad part, here's the messed up part. There was 2 people in this room. So there was another person over in the other, this poor old, I feel so bad for this person. There was another person on the other side. This wasn't this was not a private room. So there's a curtain drawn, and there's another person over there hearing all this, probably having a heart attack because they could not believe what was going on. So the curtain's closed onto that side, and I'm standing up against that curtain looking down at the person, and there's nothing we can do. I'm praying. So I'm standing there praying, and I hear this, stop. There's nothing you can do to stop this. And I had my head down, and I look up, and I'm just looking around, and nobody's even looking at me. They're not, I'm thinking it's somebody that's talking to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I think there was an angel or something, or I know it wasn't bad. I mean, a bad spirit or anything. It's whether it was an angel, just watching him get taken away. But he was seeing the angel of death, the angel, whatever it is, the fallen angel, demon, whatever, coming and taking him, because he is screaming, I'm not going, no, no, no. And that man literally went from that screaming and hollering to just the last breath, boom, done. And the lights were flickering. And everybody, I'm trying not to laugh. I wasn't laughing then, but when I sit and think about it, and when I looked up and I just looked at everybody, they were shocked. It was silence. Absolutely, you could hear a pin drop. Absolute silence, and everybody just they were in shock. Because I don't think they really truly believed what they were seeing. And I wasn't going to tell them. I wasn't going to sit and go, hey, your father just got taken down to heaven. They just came and got him. The only difference between this and Patrick Swayze's movie is you didn't see the dark, like, you didn't see the shadow come and grab him. You didn't hear that sound. That was the only difference.
So I used to work in this ER in Miami, and it was like Thanksgiving weekend or a holiday weekend, and we were switching from the old ER to the new ER, like in the new building. And we were kind of doing it like mid shift, like we would discharge patients or send them upstairs, and then any new patients, they'd go to the new one. So like the whole day we're like transitioning from like this little ER to the new building. And me and this other tech were kind of still like figuring out like the new ER. So I had bagged up some linens and I took it to like the dirty utility, and he held the door and I put it into the thing, and then we closed the door and I hear like scratching or like knocking in the wall. And I was like, Casey, hold on, what is that? And then we just like stay there silent, and it sounded like something or someone was in the wall. So I like knocked back on the wall. I was like, hello? And then no more scratching. And then I like run out of the room because I'm not oriented to this new building yet. And I'm like, what's on the other side of this wall? So I run out of the room and I'm like, and it's just like an empty patient room. And I'm like, what was that? It sounded like someone was like in the wall. I don't know. So creepy.
I used to work as an emergency room technician. And to all the ER techs out there, you know that you get to see a whole lot while being underpaid. But that's besides the point of this story. But as an ER tech, you know that you see a whole lot. Whenever you see a helicopter coming in or hear the helicopter coming in, you don't know what you're going to expect, right? Whether it be self-inflicted wounds, wounds that come from tractors, car accidents, pew-pews, a variety of things that you can experience in the trauma bay. But this story does not revolve around a trauma bay, but it does revolve around a very strange woman and her husband. Now, these individuals checked themselves. Well, he checked her in the hospital because she was extremely constipated. Now, if I can describe what she looked like, she was like an older lady, long white flowing hair. She had this huge cloak on, like a huge gown of sorts, but it wasn't like a nightgown. It was more like a cloak, actually. It just looked very, very, I guess unorthodox, I would say. You don't really see that every day. And she had this necklace with this strange amulets, right? This like turquoise kind of thing going on. And her husband had on like the same kind of hats that the Peaky Blinders used to wear. Pretty cool hat, by the way. He was another older gentleman, obviously, as well. And he had this book, this leather-bound book that you would have thought it was a Bible, but there is no words Holy Bible anywhere in the book. It was just a leather-bound book. Very old. I thought it was a journal, but then I was like, how can a journal be that thick? I don't know. Now, like I said, she was constipated, and apparently it wasn't a matter of just giving her laxatives and letting her, relieve herself. Apparently she'd been taking laxatives for a long time that day, and she was unable to make a movement. So she got worried, apparently, and her husband checked her in. Now, as an ER tech, sometimes you get the poop end of the stick, so to speak. The nurses will often send you to do things that will revolve around helping someone use the bathroom, helping someone get to where they need to go, like help them with their mobility, make sure, they're ambulatory, stuff like this, right? You experience this along with the high-speed stuff. I'm thinking this is another run-of-the-mill, like an older lady needs help with getting the bathroom, so I grab her a bedside commode, and I put it by her. Now, when it comes to individuals who have a issue of being ambulatory, which she had an issue, she wasn't fully ambulatory on her own, so I had to make sure I was there with her to allow for her to, make a bowel movement safely. And as I was helping her into the chair, she was just murmuring this phrase, "Satan, get out of me." Like she was murmuring it, like, "Satan, get out of me." Like this. I'm like, okay, all right, that's kind of strange. So eventually I helped her sit down, and I'm letting her do her business. So I give her the decency, obviously, and I turn around, right? And she starts yelling, "Satan, get out of me," loud, like very, very loudly. She's screaming at the top of her lungs at this point, screaming, "Satan, get out of me." And I'm like, you don't hear that every day when someone wants to make a bowel movement. But I mean, like, I guess I just tossed it up to just being an ER experience, right? This lady keeps saying it over and over to the point where one of the nurses peeked their head in just to see what's going on. And then they just immediately left because they realized what was going on. But they, she's just pooping, right? The husband picked up the book and put his left hand on her shoulder and started saying something that did not sound Russian, I don't speak Russian, but I can get a vibe if it sounds Slavic. I didn't really get that idea of a Slavic type of language. It sounded kind of like Latin, but kind of inverted. It sounded like obviously I don't speak Latin either, but you kind of get the idea when someone's speaking Latin, right? Tu et totus, stuff like this, right? It's like a strange, like a Latin, Italian kind of vibe, Spanish kind of vibe, but it was like inverted. Like it just sounded strange. It almost sounded like he was speaking backwards. Like it just sounded so weird how he was talking, and he was changing his tone of his voice and making it sound like more echoey. I can't describe it. It was so weird. It was so weird to the point where I had to go get a nurse real quick. I just go grab the nurse real quick. I went to go get the sitting nurse for the room, and I went and got her real quick. I was like, "Can you come here and help me real quick? These individuals are kind of like just check it out. So I brought her in, and then here the nurse and I are now in the room, and they're basically he's doing this humming with these language, and she's screaming, "Satan, get out of me! Satan, get out of me!" like over and over. And then she looked at me for a second and said, "Can you pull it out of me?" "Ma'am, can I pull what out of you?" I mean, obviously I didn't say that, but I said, "No, ma'am. I'm gonna go ahead and and then the nurse just stopped me for a second and said, "1 second. Okay, we'll be right back." So we go and grab some, like, some laxatives and some stuff like this, and also some other materials and whatnot that can basically help her, release. Come to find out, by the time we get back, she ended up, making the bowel movement. And I kid you not, what was inside of that bedside commode looked like it had veins on it. Now, obviously, no one poops anything out with veins on it, but I'm telling you right now, this thing looked like it had veins on it. At best, they might have been perforations of veins, but they were multicolored. Some were like purplish, some was like red, and also it was blood. I come to find out that the husband pulled it out of her, right? And his hands were bloody. So, we no longer needed the thing that we were going to use to help her, make the bowel movement, right? So the nurse went to go put it back. I went to go grab some more stuff to basically help him with cleaning his hands. When I come back, he's touching everything. Mind you, his hands is covered in blood. And he's touching everything in the room. I'm like, sir, stop touching stuff, sir. He's like, I was trying to clean my hands. Bro, you don't have to touch the bedside commode. You don't have to touch the bed, the counters to clean your hands. There's a whole sink right there. But obviously the faucet also had blood on it too. He was touching everything. Mind you, his hands were very bloody. I was like, how much blood can come out of somebody from a bowel movement? Because, like, literally, he pulled it out of her. He pulled the bowel out of her, or whatever that thing was, right? So, I give him some hand sanitizer. I help him clean up his hands and whatnot, and I clean up the area and whatnot, wipe all the blood as much as I can from there, because janitorial service refused to do it because apparently it was a bodily fluid issue, which made no sense. That was called EVS, environmental something service, whatever. I don't know why they didn't clean it up themselves, but I mean, hey, I guess it's what an ER tech is for, right? So after I clean up all the blood and whatnot, and like move the bedside commode to get her stand up, and as I'm helping her hands are like super cold, by the way. Her hands were like so cold. It was crazy. Maybe she had a Raynaud's phenomenon where, like, basically your extremities get like colder than normal, but the room was hot. The room was very, very hot. It was like a solid 78 degrees in that room. They had it set hot intentionally because apparently, yeah. So the craziest thing was, well, the second craziest thing besides that was that when I'm trying to get her into the bed, the husband puts down the leather-bound book and try to, like, because he picked it up again for some reason. He puts it down, and then he like grabs her with me and tried to help her. And then she smacked away his hand and said, "I'm never letting you take me back there again." I beg your pardon? What do they have going on? Like, this is what I'm wondering. What is going on? Like, take her back where? Where did she go? Is this connected to her saying what she's been saying and experiencing? I don't have a clue. But while I was helping her get into the bed, the nurse had grabbed the bedside commode, grabbed the whatever that thing was, and then took it out. So I never got a second look at it.
Okay, my one and only paranormal experience, and it's pretty bad. It affected me so profoundly that I actually changed my belief in the afterlife, and not in a good way. So I was admitting this patient onto hospice years ago, and like the second I walked into her house, like every hair on my body stood up. I felt like sick. I was like, something is not right here. It just felt really awful. And then on top of that, I hate to say this, but the patient themselves like felt not right. Like when I was with them, I felt like all types of bad feelings, which is really awful to even say. So as time went on, she didn't have any family there, so her friends were caring for her. And they were a very spiritual group of people, which is great. So there was like prayer circles and, angel photos and like dream catchers and crystals, things like that. And as time went on, the friends and the patients started like draping the whole house in like white sheets. So like in the rafters, all around the windows, then on the furniture, then on the floor. So like when you walked in the house, it was supposed to be like light and airy, but it wasn't. I feel like it was the closest to evil I had ever come. And I didn't even like believe in evil at the time, but it was like the second I walked in the house, it was like, oh my God, even though the whole apartment was like draped in white cloth and covered with like crosses and angels and things that were supposed to feel warm and loving. And then it gets worse because then the patient starts actively dying eventually. And it was so hard to be in that house and with that patient because the anger and the awfulness that was in the house and around the patient was like unbearable and like undeniable. Anyway, I feel embarrassed even talking about this because it sounds so much like a horror movie, but that's what it felt like. I think about that patient and that house all the time, and I pray for her well-being. And she didn't die a very peaceful death, no matter what we did. And it was awful. And to this day, my belief system has changed. Like, I do believe now that there's not just love and light. There's other things. I feel even like embarrassed admitting that, but that's how profound this experience was.
So I was working ICU at my old hospital in Alabama, and I had a patient who was actively dying, and she was comfort care only, meaning that we had all accepted that she was dying, her family had accepted it, and we were just keeping her comfortable. So I would go in every hour and check on her, and sometimes she wanted to talk. So I go in and it's 11 or 12 at night, and she says, "Who's that little boy that keeps coming to my door?" And I said, "I don't know. What does he look like?" And she said, "He's about 2 or 3 years old. He's wearing a little red suit. He just comes to the door and stares at me." And I said, "I'm not sure. This is an adult ICU, so there shouldn't be children in here." And I said there shouldn't be children, but I knew. There was one. There was a little boy who would come and visit the patients, and the patients would see him, and then they would pass away within 24 hours. And I knew that was who she was seeing. So I just kept her company, kept coming in, and a couple hours later I come in and she wanted to hold my hand. So we're holding hands and she's talking and she looks at me and she says, "Honey, when I'm gone, make sure you take care of Bruce." And I got chills all over my body because Bruce is my dad's name. And I said, "Who is Bruce?" And she said, "You know who he is. You look just like him." And I do. I look exactly like my dad. And I said, "What do I need to take care of? What do I need to do?" And she said, "You just watch over him. Make sure he doesn't fall." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she drifted off to sleep. And I walked out. And a couple hours later, her daughter came in to visit. And I asked her daughter, "Do you know anybody named Bruce? Your mom was talking about a Bruce last night." And the daughter said, "No, I don't know anybody named Bruce." And I said, "You don't have any siblings or cousins or anything?" And she said, "No." She said, "I'm an only child. As far as I know, it was my mother's only pregnancy. So I don't think it would even be maybe a child that she had lost." She said, "We don't know anyone named Bruce." So I went home and I thought about that all day. And when I came back in that night, my patient had passed away.
So when my mom told me this story, it gave me goosebumps. So my mom is a hospice nurse, and one night a few years ago she was on call, and she gets a call from one of the hospitals in town that says, "Hey, we got a patient. They just got the bad news from the doctor and they want to be on hospice. My mom did her job. Okay, let them know I'll be there shortly. Probably take me about 10 minutes. So at the hospital was this woman. She had just gotten told by the doctor, the bad news that she had terminal cancer and she didn't have a whole lot longer to live. So while her family was there, they elected to go on hospice for the remaining time that she had left. So after they had made the decision as a family, her kids, everybody, they left. So Jane was kind of sitting there taking it all in while she was waiting for the hospice nurse. In this moment, a woman walks in her room and Jane's kind of looking up like, who the f-? And this woman introduces herself and says, "Hi, my name's Betty. I'm your neighbor. I've been your neighbor for the last couple days here in the hospital. I'm just in the room down the hall. And I heard the bad news. So I just wanted to come in and say, is there anything I can do for you to let you know that it's going to be okay?" And Jane was like, "What do you mean you heard how did you hear the bad news?" And she was kind of taken aback by this. And she's talking, and she goes, "No, I'm okay. I think I just need some time. The hospice nurse is coming. I'm going to just take some time to myself." So this woman comes through and goes, "Okay, okay, sweetie, we're in the Midwest. Okay, sweetie, if you need anything, let me know." And so instead of turning around and leaving the room, Betty turns and walks into the bathroom of Jane's room and shuts the door. And Jane was just kind of shocked, like, what is happening here? And literally, probably 60 seconds after that happened, my mom got there. She came and she knocked on the door. "Hi, I'm the hospice nurse. Do you have a minute to talk?" And Jane was kind of like, "Yeah, I guess." So my mom, she's been a nurse for a really long time. And so she sees like this hesitation on Jane's face and she can hear it in her voice. And she's like, "Is there something on your mind? Do you want to say something?" And Jane was kind of like, "So my neighbor, Betty, just came in and, was really sweet, really a nice lady, but she just went into the bathroom and she's still in there." My mom was like, "Oh, okay. How long has she been in there?" And Jane was like a minute or so, but I can't, I don't hear anything. I don't hear, what's going on. So my mom is trying to be very polite. Obviously, this is a situation where Betty doesn't need to be there. And, my mom's been in healthcare for a long time. She thought maybe Betty might have a little dementia or something. So she walks over to the bathroom door and she knocks and there's no answer. And she knocks again and she says, "Hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm with hospice. I'm going to open the door." So then she goes to open the door and there's nobody in there. Then, my mom says to Jane, "Gosh, there's nobody in here." And Jane's like, kind of wigged out. Obviously, she's like, I had a conversation with her. Like, I'm not sleeping. I'm not groggy. She was in there. And so, my mom was like, "Okay, well, let's, he just had a traumatic, thing happen. It's a lot going on. Let's kind of get going. We'll talk through this and, maybe I'll go check on Betty and maybe she slipped out at some point when you didn't see her." So they finished the paperwork because, of course, it's healthcare. There's paperwork for everything. So they finished the paperwork. My mom says, they finished chatting and my mom says, "Okay, well, I'll go check on Betty and we'll be with them." And Jane's like, "Okay, thank you for coming." So my mom leaves and walks over to the room that Betty said she was from. And she looks in and there's nobody in there. So then she walks down to the nurse's station to report off, I guess, what she had done and kind of keep in communication with the nurses. And as she's reporting to the nurses, she tells them, "Hey, Jane said Betty kind of came in her room right before I got there and I can't find her in her room now. So I just want to make sure that, if she has dementia or something, she's not lost somewhere. So if somebody could just make sure she's okay." And I'll never forget my mom's face when she told me this part. She said the nurse looks at her and goes, "What?" So my mom goes, "Betty, I just want to make sure she's okay. She was in, and recants the story." And the nurse looks at her and goes, "Betty died this morning, like 12 hours ago. Betty's not there. Betty was not in her room." And of course, my mom was shooketh by this. My mom is not a storyteller. She's not she's a spiritual person, but, she's not big into the paranormal. So this really took her back. She was pretty freaked out by this, but yeah, when she told me the story, like I said, I know her. She doesn't make up stories. She doesn't make this stuff up. So when she was telling me this, like, I got goosebumps. I'm like, that is creepy.
I've been an RN for almost 30 years, majority of which was in a level 1 trauma facility, and I was an ER nurse. And this story is going to actually start before I was specifically there as a professional nurse. And that was in the early 80s. We had candy stripers. which were volunteers that helped on nursing units, passing trays, passing water. Back then, since we didn't have computer systems like we do today, everything was like you would help stamp paperwork, bring newspapers to the room, those sort of things. And I did that. And while I was there working in that hospital at that period of time, there happened to be a horrendous murder where 2 lab workers were murdered by one of the spouses of one of them. And there was 2 women. And yes, this is public news. It was in the papers. It was on the news. So there. And anyway, so then fast forward to now I have become a nurse, and I am now employed as a nurse in the emergency room. And before I got there, there had been construction where the lab in which this crime was committed was actually demolished, and a new lab was built. And in that old space, our emergency room observation unit was built. So one night I'm working, and there's 3 pods. There's about 12, 15 beds. I can't remember exactly since I don't work in that setting anymore. Where in the front pod, there was maybe 1 or 2 people. I was in the middle pod. I had 1 person, and the third pod was completely empty. At one point, the call lights started going off, and they were going off in rooms where there were no patients. And I thought this was really odd. And we had kind of an antiquated call light system. So I would pick up the handheld phone, which I know a lot of you may not. I mean, I've been a nurse longer than most of you have been alive that might be watching this. So we had like a phone cradle kind of deal that we held to our head. That had a cord, wild, I know. But anyway, I picked it up. All I'm hearing is static. And I'm like, okay, unusual, but I wasn't going to worry about it. And I let it go. So it got to be about 3:30. You're tired. You're working night shift because as a new grad, we all had to work night shift as new grads back then. And, I'm sitting there doing my charting, and all of a sudden I hear real soft, like a woman crying. And I did have a female patient in my pod. And I was just like, that's really odd. So I went and checked on her, and, not a sound. And when I, walked into her room, that sound of crying also stopped. But I looked at her and I assessed her, made sure everything was okay. She was good. Closed the curtain, went back, sat down. Probably about 5 minutes or so later, I start hearing this like soft whimpering again, but I could hear this time it was coming more from another room that I knew didn't have a patient in it. Now, mind you, in the second pod that I'm in, historically speaking, that is where these 2 women were killed. So for reference. So I walk up to the curtain and I can kind of hear a muffled whimper, and I open up the curtain and nothing, the room is completely empty. And I'm like, all right. So we have that. Well, move on to, I don't know if it was a month or a year later or what it was, but it was a significant amount of time had passed, and I'm working over there again on night shift. By chance, I happened to have an elderly family member that was in that area. And the next morning when I went over to check on her, she said to me, it's really odd. I kept seeing this woman. She would just all of a sudden be in the doorway across from my bed, and she would walk forward, but I would never see her walk back. She would just walk forward. And when she's telling me this, all of a sudden she had oxygen on. All of a sudden the oxygen just all of a sudden on its own went full blast, and the connector blew right off of the oxygen. And I was just like, wow, okay. And I said, well, I'm not really sure what that was about, but I said, I'll check into it, and that was kind of the end of the story. I kind of knew what it was, but I wasn't going to say anything. So I went and talked to one of the other nurses that had been there a lot longer than I had, that was familiar with the story and the history of that area. And I said, hey, there's been some weird things. And my family member said they saw a woman walk from one side to the other side, but never back. Just kept reappearing. And she's like, oh yeah. She's like, I guess it's residual energy from one of the people that was killed in there, but that's why call lights go off, and that's what we see sometimes, or what we hear sometimes. And she's like, yeah, sometimes you will hear somebody crying. So, that's one of those things, kind of a wild little story.
Okay, so this situation happened within a 3-day time span. So I used to do home health care. And I had this one lady, and she was the sweetest can be. Like, she was one of my favorites. But she was 103. You couldn't tell she was 103 because she looked really good, and she was still independent, but she really just needed someone to like be there with her and watch her to make sure nothing happened. So I was third shift. I did 7:30 to 7:30. I had about 3 to 4 days on, and then I had the rest of the days off. So like I said, this happened in a 3-day time span because by the 4th day, she was unfortunately gone. So first night comes, and every time when I would get there, she would always have like a pillow and a blanket and the remote waiting for me, because she's like, you're going to be here all night. You might as well get comfortable, watch some TV, do what you got to do, which I did get comfortable, watch some TV. I did. So I'm in the living room watching TV. Now, mind you, off to the side, there were a set of stairs that led to the upstairs, but she had not been upstairs in the last, I think, like 10 years because she just could not do stairs anymore. So the upstairs was just really not used, and her family didn't really come see her either. So no one had been in the upstairs in about 10 years. So as I'm sitting there watching TV, all of a sudden I literally hear footsteps, light footsteps come down the stairs. And it happened real quick, but I heard the footsteps come down the stairs. So I quick look over, and I'm sitting there like, nah, I'm tripping. I'm tripping. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. I ain't got no sleep. I really didn't get no sleep the night before. So I'm like, I'm tripping. I'm just tripping. So about a good maybe 2 minutes later, I hear the footsteps going back up the stairs. Like, when you can hear from going up and going down. I heard the footsteps going back up the stairs. So at this point, I know I'm not tripping. I know for a fact I heard something. It's not because I'm late, because I'm tired. I really heard something. So I go and I check on, we'll call her Miss Mabel. So I go and I check on Miss Mabel, and she's sitting straight up in her bed, right? Staring at a corner in her room. And I'm like, Miss Mabel. And she did not snap out of it until I went over and I touched her shoulder. And she said, oh, what are you doing up? Or is everything okay? And I'm like, girl, are you okay? So I put her back to bed. And then the night passes, I leave, I come back the next night. So the next night comes, and this night I am exhausted. Like, I had just worked my second job earlier in the day. I didn't get a chance to take a nap, so I am exhausted because I had been up almost 24 freaking hours, right? So I'm sitting there, I'm dozing off on the couch, and all of a sudden I hear her talking. But not like as in like just saying, oh, just having a little conversation with herself. No, she's literally, everything she's saying is a response to something. Like, she's having a conversation with somebody. So after a little while, I go in the room and I ask, I'm like, hey, Miss Mabel, like, what's going on? You okay? Like, who are you talking to? This lady looks at me with the biggest smile on her face. And she said, oh, I'm just talking to the lovely lady that's been coming to see me for the past couple nights. So you know what immediately popped in my head? What lady? Ain't no lady in here. So I'm like, okay, girl, okay, I'm like, maybe we should get you back to bed. So I put her back to bed, and that night passes, and I go home. Third night comes. So the third night comes, and this is where like just really starts to just amp up. So I'm sitting on the couch in the living room minding my business, right? And all of a sudden I hear footsteps come back down those stairs. Okay? And this time I hear them go into the kitchen. Mind you, the kitchen is right behind me. So I'm frozen in fear. I'm not looking behind me at all. I'm sitting there acting like I didn't hear it. I don't know what the was going on. So after about 5 minutes of me sitting there frozen in fear and in sweat, Miss Mabel comes around the corner. Now, mind you, in the living room, she had this special chair that she loved to take naps in, or she loved to just come and sleep in the middle of the night when she couldn't, just sleep in her bed. So she comes in and she's like, you know what? I think I'm going to just spend the rest of the night in here with you. And I said, why, Miss Mabel? Is everything okay? That's fine, but are you okay? This woman looks at me and she goes, the people in my room won't stop talking to me. Hello? So at this point, I'm terrified, but I don't want her to know that I'm terrified and that I'm in my pants right now, because I'm supposed to be there to protect you, right? Right. So I finally get her to go back to sleep so I can be in fear by myself. So I jet out the door the next day. I was so glad to see the day nurse come because I was like, girl, I gotta go. And literally, probably around like 5 or 6 o'clock that night, I got a call saying I don't have to come in because she passed away. And I feel like whatever was going on in that house, or whoever was going through the house or running through the house or messing with her in the middle of the night, I really feel like they were preparing her to go. Looking back on it, I really feel like they was. But I don't know. I've never experienced anything else like that ever again. I hope that I never do, because that was some freaky shit. But yeah.
We're going to talk about something that happened to my mom in Mexico. Because, look, Mexico, I don't know. The things that happen there, I think they're worse than the things that happen here. So, my mom's been a nurse for like 1,000 years. She got her nursing license when she was like 22 or 23, something like that. I don't know. And in Mexico, it's very common for you to work in a hospital full of nuns who are also nurses. This was back in like the 80s, and it's just a common thing in Mexico. So apparently my mom used to work the night shift at this hospital, and she said that it was a busy night and one of the patients had pushed their call light, so she went in to see what they needed. And apparently they wanted to be changed and also wanted the bed sheets to be changed. So my mom went and grabbed what she was going to need, but while she was grabbing the supplies, they called a code blue. So someone coded another room and she had to leave what she was doing to go assist with the code. So she said that it had already been about 45 minutes since the code was called, and the patient ended up passing and they had to call, the morgue. Anyways, it's just a bunch of process. And after everything, it had been about 45 minutes and she still hadn't gone to help the patient. So she worked her way over to the supply closet where she was getting the stuff from, gathered the stuff that she needed, and headed over to the patient room. She walked into the patient room and she apologized and said, "I'm sorry, we had an emergency. I'm sorry that it took so long, but I have the stuff now if you would still like me to change you." The patient said, "Oh no, don't worry about it. One of the other nurses already changed the bed sheets and she gave me something to eat, and I'm all cleaned up. There's no need." My mom said that she kind of just stood there and said, "Well, that's weird because all the nurses that were on the floor were at the code. So who came and changed you?" And that the patient responded, "Oh, it was one of the madrecitas," which means like it was one of the mothers, which was one of the nurses that worked in the hospital. Because like I said, they used to work with nuns. And my mom said, "Are you sure that somebody came and changed you?" And the patient said, "Yes, I'm sure. They came, they changed the bed sheets, they changed me, and they fed me." Patient said that the nurse was really sweet, but talked in a very, very low voice and didn't really make much conversation, that she just came in and did what she needed to do. My mom was kind of weirded out because she didn't understand who could have gone in to help the patient because everybody was assisting with the code. So she said she went and asked some of her coworkers and asked if they had helped, and everybody said no. And then she went to go tell her supervisor, which was one of the nuns, and she said that she giggled and told her, "It's Mother so-and-so." I don't remember the name. She said she is infamous for helping out when there's nobody to help the patients, but she passed away like 20-something years ago. My mom said that she was still kind of doubtful after speaking to her supervisor, so she went back and asked the patient what this nurse looked like, and patient told her she was wearing a white dress with her little nurse's hat, white stockings, white shoes, and she went back to my mom went back to verify to see what this nun looked like. Then my mom went to go ask for a picture of this nun, this ex-nurse, and showed it to the patient. Sure enough, it was the mother / nurse / nun who had passed away 20 years prior. My mom said that she was in shock to think that somebody who had passed away, so the spirit or the soul of somebody who had worked there so many years prior came and helped the patient because they view that all the other nurses were busy. My mom said that this was not the last encounter that she had with this nun, and she was in other situations where she was busy and couldn't help the patient in that moment, and this nurse nun came and helped the patient. I think it's just crazy that it had been happening for years, and it was only for some reason on the night shift. She had asked her other coworkers to see if it happened during the day, and it didn't. It would only happen on the night shift. So I guess thank you to Mother, whoever your name is, and the fact that you still come and help your patients even after death. I just hope I don't have an encounter with the ghost nurse, because I just don't, I don't have the energy. Okay, bye.
Can we talk about this creepy video out of Texas by TikTok user Lady V? And while working night shift at a hospital, she's able to capture a ghostly voice of one of the resident spirits where she works. And many commenters were quick to point out that they too work at hospitals and have seen and heard things that they can't explain. And while the ghostly voice that she captured is faint, many believe it's calling out for its mother. I've enhanced the audio as best I can, but definitely let me know. What do you think?
Did you hear her?
Yes.
You hear her? She probably thinks I'm her mom. That was you.
No, I swear to God. Was that something?
Make sure to like and subscribe for more chilling mysteries. And until next time, stay safe, stay aware, question everything, and please stay out of the shadows.